Hi, I'm Victoria Julianne,
Hey, I'm Avery Francis.
and we are the hosts of the Counterculture Teen podcast. We are here to inspire a spirit of faith and patriotism in the hearts of young Americans like you.
Stick around. We're about to break cultural norms and champion the next generation of fearless patriots.
Hey everyone, I'm Victoria, your host for the Counterculture Teen podcast today, and right now we have children's pastor Carlos Farias here with us on the podcast. Carlos is 27 years old. He grew up in a Catholic household and did not enter a Baptist church until he was around 15. Around age 16, he got saved at teen camp where he surrendered his life to God. Today, he is married with one child and another on the way. He credits his decision to accept Christ as Savior at 16 as the starting point that shaped the path of his life from that point forward. And I just wanted to thank you, Carlos, for coming on here with us today. So, first of all, just to lay the groundwork a little, would you give us a summary of your testimony and how you came to know Christ as a teenager?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, like the testimony or the description said, I went to Catholic church and I just didn't feel anything great there. And plus, it was in Spanish and no one taught me Spanish. So, like, what was the point of me being there? But
Right.
yeah, so we went to Catholic church and it didn't feel like anything. And then when I was about 12 or 13, I told my grandma, I don't want to go to church anymore. I don't like it. And so she didn't fight me on that. And then my uncle, he started going to church, to Mosaic Baptist Church, and he was going there pretty faithfully. And he was inviting a lot of our family. He invited my mom. My mom got saved, and then she kept trying to invite me, but I did not want to go. And she asked me a lot of times to go, but finally, she asked me to go on Mother's Day, and I didn't get saved then, but it just took a few months and a few different times being at church to finally feel that conviction. And then we went to camp the next year, and that's where I got saved. And ever since then, I just tried my best to live for God, and we're not perfect, but that's just a little bit of my testimony.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. At least straight into my next question. So, what were some of the biggest factors in your life that drove you to make that decision to follow Jesus as a teenager?
Well, even though I wasn't raised in a Christian family, one of the biggest factors was my mom. She was always trying to get me to go to church before I got saved. And even when we both got saved, she wanted to go to church more. And so I went with her. And sometimes we underestimate that or don't take that. We take for granted that we have Christian parents who want us to go to church and invest in us spiritually. But like someone for me who didn't have that for 14 years, it's a big deal. And something else that drove me to make that decision was I didn't really know much about following the Lord. I just knew that it was a good thing to do. And Pastor Robert, they helped me, they guided me to just seek Christ. And, once you really are living for Christ, you experience that joy and fulfillment. You really don't want to go back to anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And I get what you're saying that we often, as Christian teenagers and young people, we don't really think about the impact that our parents make on us, especially as young people, and we're just kind of like carefree and whatever. But yeah, especially that discipleship in the home, especially when that teenager or child is young, is really vitally important to how strong they're going to be in their faith as an adult. And it sounds like your mom has really played a huge part in helping you become the person you are today. And so, in contrast to that, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you faced as a teen who was a new Christian, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of the biggest ones for me was being in public high school. There's always like influences, people that try to get you to do things, and that wasn't really a problem for me. I think one of the biggest obstacles that I faced as a teenager was trying to decide what my life path would be after high school. I thought that I knew what would be best, that God God didn't know what I wanted for my life, but obviously that was wrong. But I thought that I was just going to go to a school, to a secular school, and do business and get a business degree and all that, which none of that's bad. But the biggest obstacle that we run into, or teenagers could run into, is trying to plan out their whole life when they haven't asked God yet about where they should go. And so that's okay. Like teenagers are ambitious, they have goals, but to not seek God in those goals is where we can face our bigger struggles, even as adults. A lot of adults make decisions without seeking God, and that was something that I had to overcome. And obviously, I didn't like it at first. And like who wants to go to Bible college? Being a Christian for only 2 years, but it was a good experience for me, and God knew that.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get what you're saying. When I was 13, I was just like really kind of a wild kid. I was really fiery and ambitious. And now that I look back on that, I think about it and I'm like, wow, that was really, at the time, it felt like I was like at the top of the world, right? Just on fire for everything. But what was missing was I didn't chase God and all of that. I was just chasing what I wanted and my own personal ambitions. Okay, my next question is what are some of the most impactful things that you learned in your teen years in regards to Christian living that continue to help you in your walk with the Lord even now as an adult?
So yeah, I remember when I was at teen camp, there was this message that was preached about the lady who broke her alabaster box and gave that to Jesus. And you think about that story, how expensive that box was and the things that were contained in it. And the practical application was that she gave her all to Jesus. Like it costed her a lot of money, a lot of resources, but she was willing to give all to Jesus. And something that I learned from that is that if I'm going to surrender my life to Jesus, it has to be all of it. We like to hold on to things like sin or habits that we don't want to fully give to the Lord. But I believe if you're not 100% surrendered to God, even if it's 98%, 99%, like that is not all. And so something like that for my teen years, to really live for God as a young person in today's culture, you have to be fully committed. You have to be serious. And especially as you grow and you get older, you become more independent. You're not underneath your parents' authority. You make your own choices. And even then, those decisions that you make as a teenager will carry on into adulthood. And so even now, as a new parent, as a ministry leader, as a coffee shop manager, I know that I need to surrender my entire life to the Lord, because without that, I'm trying to do things in my own power and trying to do things with my own wisdom and my own ability. And the Bible is very clear that just falls short.
Right, for sure. And I think it's really clear that once you know the Bible well enough, that even though going your own way for a time might seem like you're getting the most out of life, it's ultimately not the best way because it's not the way of God. And I think personally how I can relate to that is whenever I feel like there's something in my grasp that I don't want to give to God, I remind myself whatever God's plan is for me, it's going to be exponentially better than what I could ever dream of. And I think that's really something, like you said, that's important for especially young people to learn, because it will affect them in great ways when they're adults and they start making these big decisions. And finally, do you have any advice for Christian teens that lack discipleship in their faith? Because you've made it clear that your mom has played a really big part in your faith and your relationship with Jesus. Or do you have any advice for teens who are very new Christians or just struggle with being a Christian teenager in this world in general?
Yeah, I would say maybe if there's any teenagers there who are like the only Christian in their family, that's a little bit more challenging. But we have to remember, like, Christ, he died and he suffered for us, and the challenges that he has faced are greater than ours. And Jesus knows the emotions we feel, the things that we face, like when we're facing obstacles, or we're feeling like we have no faith, or we're doubting, like Jesus knows how we're feeling. And I think that, not to be rude, but if there's a Christian who's a teenager and they find themselves inconsistent in their Bible time, they're not praying, they're not faithful to church, those things are just a personal issue, right? Like, you're not making it a priority in your life. Being a Christian is not just about salvation and eternity in heaven, it's about intentional living. People who sin, who choose to do wrong, they're intentionally living in sin. And it's no different for Christians. We have to be intentional to live for the Lord, because the more actions that we perform in the flesh will reap what we sow. And what happens is that when you're not working on your own walk, if you're only relying on church or things like that for spiritual growth and health, it won't work. And so if you're lacking discipleship in your faith, you have to have the heart to want to learn and grow. You have to make Bible reading a priority. You have to pray. You have to be faithful to church. These are all things that the Bible commands. And there's a point in our lives where we get too comfortable with routine, but if you really do focus on those basic things, that will help you in your faith. And if you're a new Christian, you're not the only one who's been a new Christian. God, he wants to help you grow. And the best way to really grow as a Christian teenager in this world, you surround yourself with other Christian teens. Surround yourself with people who are believers already. Because if you're spending the majority of your time with people who are lost and who are not saved, you'll just pick up on their tendencies. And that's not to say that you shouldn't hang out with people who are lost, because we have to be a witness. But for influence, for direction, for counsel, we need to be spending the majority of our time with Christians. And just like in high school, I try to stay away from people who were involved in things that I knew I shouldn't be involved in. And that helped me be able to walk closer to Christ. And also, to be a Christian teenager in today's culture is very different. You stick out like a sore thumb. You have the opportunity to wear your Bible out on your chest and just really show people what it's like to not live so normally, as the world would say.
Right, yeah, I totally agree with that, especially in the part where you said that it's definitely different, I think, to be a Christian in this day and age, but that just gives us Christians as the opportunity to be a light unto the world and to shine even brighter for Jesus. Thank you so much for coming on here today, Carlos. This has been very great advice.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for joining us. Tune in next time for another episode.
If you like this show, be sure to subscribe to our email list below and follow us on Spotify and YouTube.
See y'all soon. And remember, in an age of compromise, it's up to us as Christians to choose to courageously counter culture for Jesus Christ.